Hi everybody, this is Con. Today I am test driving a Mazda 2. Okay, though probably not the same Mazda 2 that most of you are familiar with lah. Okay, now you see the current generation Mazda 2 has been in our market for a good 3-4 years. Okay, and it has been a very well received model. Many buyers here in the B segment are quite happy with this package of a relatively compact, stylish and fun to drive package, and also decently well equipped, except for the fact that it only has 2 airbags, whereas the likes of the City have go up to 4 or 6 airbags lah. Okay, the Mazda 2's only weakness in terms of its kit count is that at all spec levels it only has 2 airbags. Okay, so the Mazda 2 as we know it, okay, 1.5 liter SkyActiv petrol. Okay, you can choose between a sedan or a hatchback version, but they are both priced at the upper end of the 80,000 spectrum. Okay, 80,000 plus spectrum, so not exactly cheap. And so if let's say you have been in the market for a Mazda 2 but you find it to be priced on the high side, now here comes this alternative that I'm driving here today. This is what Burmas calls this the Mazda 2 Core Spec. As I'm filming this review, the price has yet to be finalized, so yeah, so I'm publishing this video only after when the price is finalized lah, okay, which I will mention in the description section. But as I film this, I understand that it is being given an indicative price thereabouts of 70 something thousand ringgit. Okay, so for safety's sake, for the purpose of this video, I'm going to assume 75 lah. So depending on what the final price is, okay, this Mazda 2 will be anywhere between 15 to 20,000 ringgit cheaper than the existing version. Okay, I've been told it is also available in sedan and hatchback body configuration. But as you would expect, considering the price difference between this and the full spec model, there will be some sacrifices in equipment, and I will get to that later. And believe me, you will be sacrificing quite a lot. Okay, but mechanically speaking, this is as per what you get with the higher spec model. So you get the same 1.5 liter SkyActiv G engine. Okay, and this means the Mazda 2 is the cheapest car in the market to offer direct injection. Okay, you see the way Mazda engineers its cars, right? The SkyActiv G engine and all the components that underpin this car, right, are not cheap. Okay, so however you look at it, right, even though this is a cost down version of the Mazda 2, you are still carrying some seriously high grade hardware underneath. So suspension, of course, the same MacPherson struts up front, torsion beam at the rear, alloy wheels downsized from 16 to 15 inches, but you still get all-round disc brakes. So without further ado, we shall adjourn outside for the exterior walk around. Alright, so the Mazda 2's shape requires no introduction to us any further. Okay, but of course last year there was a facelifted version that refined this section of the grille a little, as well as added this chrome strip at the fog lamp assembly. But otherwise, this is largely the same appearance of the Mazda 2 that we are quite familiar with. So this Core Spec model gets halogen headlights as opposed to LEDs in the high spec model. An acceptable reduction in spec given the price. Okay, alloy wheels, okay, are downsized from 16 inches in the high spec model to 15s here. Okay, and you don't get keyless entry. Okay, but you still get rear disc brakes, and in my books that's a good thing. Okay, tail lights are as per the existing model. This now the Mazda 2 was also updated with G vectoring control. Okay, From the back, it looks pretty much the same as the regular spec Mazda 2, but of course, as you notice, here is all nice and smooth. You know what this means? It means got no reverse sensor, and neither is there a reverse camera. But appearance wise, is this down spec look acceptable? To me it is. These rims to me are okay, not as nice looking as the 16-inch wheels, but as I always argue, right, smaller rims mean better straight line performance, better comfort, and lower tire replacement costs. Okay, the halogen headlights, admittedly not as nice as the LEDs, but the LED headlights are not something that you cannot live without. Okay, my only gripe would be the absence of keyless entry. Okay, I would wish that they have left keyless entry here, okay, at a slightly high, and leave the car at a slightly higher price. No reverse sensors is okay, but I would have argued for the inclusion of a reverse camera. Okay, some may argue that a car this small, the size of a Mazda 2, don't actually need a reverse camera, but I beg to differ. Because if you have a small kid standing here without a reverse sensor or reverse camera to tell you, you will not know that there is a hazard right behind your car, and you may accidentally injure or kill somebody standing right behind the vehicle. Okay, of course, in a clear open space, you don't need either a sensor or camera with a car this size, but as I always argue, these days a reverse camera is a safety feature rather than a convenience feature. Alright, so let's get inside. Okay, no keyless entry, but you still get start-stop button. Okay, for me personally, I much prefer to have a barrel to start the key the old-fashioned way if a car does not come with keyless entry. But I can understand why Mazda made the button as standard. It is simply because to save cost. You see, at the side here, right, there is no, the steering column does not have that mold in place for the ignition barrel. So the idea is that, I believe, is that they just wanted to create a single unified dashboard mold, okay, that they will standardize the button. But the cost up option for them to spec the car up would be whether or not the buyer chooses keyless entry. Okay, so if you ask me, if your car does not have keyless entry and you have that button, right, it's actually very mafan, because you walk to the car, you take your key fob out, you press, then when you get into the car, if earlier you had forgotten to put the key fob back inside the pocket, then you'll be like, you need to look for a place to keep your key fob. Okay, but anyways, let's look at what this car has to offer. So this being the base spec car, you are reminded that you bought a base spec car immediately as soon as you touch the steering wheel, because this steering rim is the polyurethane rim, whereas the high spec Mazda 2, if I remember correctly, will have leather wrapped steering wheel. But you still get steering mounted audio controls. This one is now blank. If I remember in the high spec version correctly, this should be cruise control or Bluetooth, but either way, it is very obvious that this is a lower spec steering wheel. Okay, now the instrument cluster, if you remember earlier from the CX3 video that I posted, this was the tachometer. This would have been the high spec gauge, but now this is the standard spec gauge lah. You have an analog speedometer, you have this monochrome virtual tachometer, okay, and then you have the trip computer at the right side. Okay, so the overall physical mold of this instrument cluster is the same, but the analog dial but the dial configuration is altered. One major difference you will immediately notice and you will every day see is that this stand-up unit here is no longer the MZD command touchscreen, but just the audio head unit. You see, the thing is that, right, many people who buy base spec cars in this segment, they buy the Kosong spec car and they expect to to go accessory shop and pasang their own audio unit and all that. With this one, you can't. At least I don't think you can. So what you have here is that this one you have a very basic radio system, volume and all that with the monochrome display. Okay, and naturally, as you would see down here, this is where in the high spec model you will have the command, sorry, the MZD connect, what you call it, rotary knob and all that. This one is just a hole, which is actually, as I would demonstrate to you right now, well, not quite big enough for my phone. Okay, same problem I experienced with the CX3. This side also not big enough to store my phone. Climate control here, manual climate control. To me, not a big deal because I live daily with a car that runs on manual climate control. So yeah, no auto climate control to me, it's not a big deal. It's not even an issue. So I'm not going to make a big fuss of that. Upholstery, fabric, brilliant. I prefer fabric over leather any day. At the very least, when I step into the car on a hot sunny day, my backside won't gonna burn. The dash finish, this is some fake carbon fiber thing, and yeah, so you see the finally is you have this fake carbon fiber thing, and then here you have a sort of like a matte carbon fiber. So there is these two sections is mismatched. Okay, I believe it's deliberate lah, but still the appearance between this and this is quite incongruous. I would much rather they have just maintained this and this to be one uniform trim. Okay, but that being said, if you look further down here, they left this so that there's this contrast effect between this smoothened carbon trim and this like matte carbon trim. Okay, and you see this these door cuts here are fabric inserts. Overall, equipment wise, right, from what I can see now, the only real missing thing that I would wish from what is given here are keyless entry. Okay, I would also have wished for more airbags. This car only has 2 airbags, but see the Mazda2, right, even at the higher spec level also only gives 2 airbags. I would also have wished for a reverse camera, but that is not that big a problem because that's something that maybe you can pasang at the accessory shop, and then you know with those one, right, you can just put in the monitor inside the rear view mirror, that kind of thing. So that on its own is, that omission is to me is unfortunate, but it's something that can be rectified. I would prefer from the factory side at least to have come with keyless entry. That would mean a greater deal to me lah. So as we all know, the Mazda2 is amongst the best lah in segment when it comes to driving enjoyment. Okay, to me personally, I rank it second behind the Ford Fiesta, but the Ford Fiesta is an aging product, and B, not as mechanically refined as the Mazda2, even though the Ford has a sharper steering, more rich feedback in its steering, and also a more exciting 1-liter EcoBoost engine. Okay, the SkyActiv G petrol engine, in comparison, it is torquey, yes, but it doesn't hit with the same kind of punch as the EcoBoost engine, and neither is it as rev happy. So I mean, if let's say outright driving excitement is what you're looking for, right, then the Fiesta actually offers more of it. The Mazda2 is just offers almost there the similar levels of enjoyment, but it feels more rounded. Okay, it feels more rounded, it feels more refined, it feels more polished. If you are familiar with how the Mazda2 drives, then this Core Spec model is largely the same. Okay, it feels largely the same. All the positive aspects such as the direct steering, the linear feel of all its controls, the torquey, muscular nature of its SkyActiv G engine, all present. But there are some small differences. Firstly, as you would expect, because this version runs higher profile tires with smaller wheels, ride comfort is slightly better than the existing high spec model, and the steering has a slightly crisper feel to it, which I personally I cannot explain, but I'll just sum it up by saying it's very nice. Okay, and yeah, basically you through this steering, right, as I'm driving over the surface of the road, right, you really can feel the contours of the road beneath you through just through the steering. It's a very, very good steering. Overall, it actually feels very, very pleasant to drive. Okay, and if I were to sum up, right, this car actually in general, it has a very pure, very uncorrupted feel about it, that you really feel a sense of connection with it. Okay, that somehow it's not quite there with the high-spec model. Okay, maybe it's just the tires that is affecting the overall feel of the car, but there is a difference. Okay, most shoppers in this segment, I reckon would actually pick the high-spec model, simply because look, that is a far more appealing looking version of the Mazda2. Because this one, when you park this, okay, this Core Spec version next to the high-spec model, right, it does look and feel very, very kosong. Okay, and the fact of the matter is that majority of Mazda buyers, they are not the same kind of mindset of people that would have bought a mainstream Japanese brand like a Honda or a Toyota. These guys buy people who buy Mazdas generally tend to want to distinguish themselves from the crowd, and people with this kind of mindset will generally go for the high-spec cars. Okay, a 70,000+ ringgit Mazda2, is it an attractive prospect? Yes and no. If you look at it purely from the mechanical point of view, then this is exceptional value, because we all know that Mazda gives, you know, a very high level of engineering to its cars. The SkyActiv platform and the SkyActiv engine are all very meticulously fine-tuned pieces of hardware. I mean, coming back to a point I made earlier, this is the most affordable brand new car in the market with petrol direct injection, nothing else. Okay, and you also still get rear disc brakes, which is more than what can be said of many cars at this price point. But the problem of this car also we can see is that this is a car that will mostly be defined by what it does not have as opposed to what it does. Okay, you see, because we have had 2 years of acclimatizing ourselves to the top spec Mazda2, right, that now we come to this Core Spec model, right, the defining questions that we ask of this car is, what does this car not have? What is this car missing from the high spec model? Okay, versus if if it had been the other way around, then it would be asking what did Mazda add to the cars. No, in this case we started things off with the top spec model, okay, fully loaded with all the bells and whistles, and now we come to this one where they take out the LED headlights, they take out the MZD Connect infotainment system, and they take out keyless entry and a few other things. So if you have come from the high spec model, the difference, okay, when you come on board this car, the difference is properly stark. In fact, this reminds me of the time when Volkswagen first introduced the TSI engines and DSG into Malaysia back then with the Passat, Polo and Jetta. Okay, at that time we all know that Volkswagen cars, in terms of features, they are under-equipped, but they compensated for all that with the most advanced powertrains in the segment, turbocharged engine, dual clutch transmission, at the price of Japanese Japanese mainstream rivals. So for a time, that strategy enjoyed some success, but but eventually it blew up in their face. But of course, it's not quite accurate to equate Volkswagen as an example, because at that time the TSI engines were new, relatively new and unproven to in our markets. The SkyActiv engines, on the other hand, are not. They have been in our market for some time, and they are not known to have possessed major reliability problems. Okay, I understand from owners, chat groups and all that, there are some minor teething problems, but not the kind of things that cannot be solved, and not the kind of things that keep your cars stuck in the workshop for some time. Of course, if any of you have a different kind of experience, do drop a line in the comment section. Okay, but as far as I know, most people in my social circle who own Mazdas, they are a relatively happy bunch. Now, the car that I am most reminded of when driving this Mazda 2 is actually the good old Suzuki Swift. Remember that car? Okay. Well, Suzuki unfortunately has had to exit the Malaysian market due to its brief, ill-fated alliance with Proton that resulted in the Ertiga and nothing else. So, but that's another topic for another day lah. Okay. So during the brief few years that Suzuki Malaysia was in business here, the Swift enjoyed a decent amount of success, and it's a very likable car, the Swift. Okay, it is pleasant looking, it is mechanically simple, and yet it is exceptionally well refined. When I remember driving the Swift on a number of occasions, both the 1.5 and later the 1.4, right, they both had that feeling that even though the car is very simple, okay, very basic, very bare bones, you get the feeling that every little component of that car is meticulously honed to perfection, and that is the same feeling that I get driving this Mazda 2 Core Spec. Yes, it's no frills, it's bare bones, but it just feels very, very resolved. So to sum this car up in a nutshell, right, I would say, right, majority of buyers, okay, you are actually better off with the high-spec Mazda 2 that comes complete with all the features and bells and whistles and all that. This car, okay, this Core Spec version, yes, it's cheaper, but if you think of it from a monthly repayment perspective, right, I doubt the difference is significant. Okay, so it means that, right, for you to consider this Core Spec version, right, it is only because your requirements are so specific that you want a car that is basic, no frills, uncomplicated to drive, okay, yet at the same time exceptionally well engineered underneath. So what the Mazda 2 Core Spec offers is, it's a no frills car, yet it is good to drive. It skims on all the all the accessories and all that, but it does not skim on the engineering. So yeah, if you're looking for a car that is simple, easy to live with, yet at the same time one which you would enjoy driving every day, this is it. Although most of you, I would reckon, are better served with the high-spec model with all the features and amenities lah. Okay, so that concludes my little review of this Mazda 2 Core Spec, and until my next video, thanks for watching, bye for now.